Hey guys, this is Michael Tarallo, Expressors Tech Evangelist, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to perform some simple date math calculations using a transform operator and an expression rule. So let's get started by utilizing our existing workspace and creating a new project. I'll call this date math, and I will make this project available for download. Next, we'll create a data flow, and within the data flow we'll grab a read file operator, a transform operator, and a write file operator. We could wire these up. And now let's configure the read file operator. So within the read file operator, we can select from a list of connections that might be defined within a shared library, or we can create a new one. So in this case, we'll create a new file connection that will browse to the location on my hard drive that has the dates text file. And we'll give it file connection 1 as the name. So inside file connection 1, which basically represents the location of where this file resides, we have an open date and a close date inside the file that we're going to use and compute the number of days. So what we're going to do now is we're going to build the delimited schema to represent this structure within the read file operator. So selecting new delimited schema, getting data from the file connection, you can see it brings me right to see tutorial tips. Select our dates.txt file, and then define the field delimiter, record delimiter, and other properties appropriately. In this case, the records are delimited by carriage return line feeds, and the fields are delimited by commas. Now, in order to represent the appropriate attribute and field names within the schema, we can use the header record and click Set All Names from Selected Row, and what that will do is define those field names appropriately. Click Next, and we can call this delimited schema date math delimited schema. And then finally, always make sure you skip your header record. So now our read file operator is configured. So what we must do next is configure the schema that we've just created to accept the appropriate data types coming in from the read file. Everything that's in a file by default is a string. What we need to do now is convert that to the appropriate data type. So in this case, we have them as strings. So what we're going to do is select open date and make that a date time. And we'll also do that with close date. Then we also have to change the mappings. So as you translate data from another data type, so for example, from string to date, we must let the semantic framework know what date format it's going to read it and store it in. So this way we provide a list of commonly used formats. If you look at the data file, you can see that we have century, year, month, day. So if we look at the tokens, we can select century, year, month, day. If you don't see yours defined in the predefined list, you can always select it from the tokens list and create your own. Okay, and we'll do that for close date as well. Save that out. So that will complete our schema and the read file operator. Now for the transform operator, what we're going to do is define a new attribute. So in this case, an attribute is the internal representation of how we're going to use that calculation inside the engine. And we do that by navigating in the rules editor once opening up the transform operator and selecting add under output attributes. And what that does is it provides this window where you can now create that new field. So in this case, we'll call it days open, and we'll represent that as an integer. Okay, now we want to create a new rule. And for simplicity's sake, we use the expression rule, and it takes two inputs, the open date and the close date. And then our days open will be the output. Next, we'll define our rule. And we have a variety of functions available under the Edit menu. In this case, the one we're interested in is date time elapse. Now you might ask yourself, how do I know what to put in the function? It's pretty simple. If you just go to the Expressor help menu and type in elapse and select datetime functions, you will have a list of all of the functions, their inputs, their expected data types, and their outputs. So in this case, you can see the datetime elapse function. If we select elapse, the usage, the value, and the formats. And you can see here the list of formats. In this case, we want days, so that's going to be represented as D. So in this case, you must prefix inputs with the value of input and then a dot. And what that will do is open up our IntelliSense auto-completion box where the parameter rules coming in will then be defined. So our open date, and then again, input dot close date, comma, and then double quote D. And that will give us number of days. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to switch over back to the data flow, and now we're going to use our write file. So for file connection, we're going to select the same file connection to store the actual file that we create in that location. And then for schema, we don't want to use the read schema because we want to take the new attribute we created called days open. So we're going to create a new one. And through a series of tutorials, you'll learn what each one of these does over time. But if you want to create something brand new with all of the attributes coming from the upstream output, which is this line right here, you select new schema from upstream output. And by doing so, it'll show you what's going to be populated. In this case, case ID, open date, closed date, status, and days open. So days open is our new attribute coming out of the transform operator. So we click next, and we can give this a name. And I'll just call this write delimited schema num days. We finish that. The file name, just call this days output.txt. And no quotes, include the header, and now we can run this particular transform. Okay, upon running, we have a successful execution. We can swap over to our file path, and you can see here's our date output.txt, and there is the appropriate case ID, open date, close date, status, and days open. Okay, so you can see that this one was open on March 13th, and it was closed on March 20th, 7 days open. This one was open on April 10th and closed on April 20th, and it's been open for 10 days. Okay, so that's how to perform that simple date math calculation. Join me in the next series in this tutorial, and what I'm going to do is then show you how to handle an empty date or a null date value. So there's a little trick utilizing another function to handle and replace a null value with system dates. Thanks for your time, guys. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you at the next tutorial.